Hello, Ice Bathers, and welcome to episode 2 of Doc Talks. So I hope you enjoyed episode 1 and got to find out a little bit more about what an athletic trainer is. So today, one of the most common questions that athletic trainers always seem to get whenever they find out about what we do is, what's the grossest injury you've ever seen, or what's the worst injury you've ever seen? So this episode, what kind of sports injuries do you treat? I'm going to talk to you about some of those injuries that I have seen. I deal with everything from, like I said, small cuts to broken bones to life-threatening emergencies. In my 33 years, I've had lots of different injuries that I've dealt with. So let's start out with the one that I think is probably, in terms of long-term prognosis, the most catastrophic injury that I've had. So due to HIPAA regulations, obviously I won't be using people's names or anything identifiable information, but the most catastrophic injury that I've had to deal with is a broken neck. And so I had an athlete one year playing football, and we were in the spring football game. And it was just an inter-squad scrimmage, and anyway, it was kind of toward the end. It was getting close, winding down. And this particular young man kind of did a head dive into some turf. And it was artificial turf. And so when I got out there to him, as I was running out there to him, I noticed really two things. Because part of our job is when we're running to the scene of an injury, we need to take in your surroundings, right? And that's part of scene safety. But it's always checking, see what's going on. And so as I'm running up to him, I noticed two things. One, he's not moving. And number two, his feet they did not have kind of a normal kind of profile or feature, the way they were sitting, right? They were kind of down. And so that looked a little strange to me. So when I got to him and started going through my history to find out exactly what happened, I said, hey, what's going on? What are you feeling? What happened? All I got was, I can't move. And so, of course, that's what you don't ever want to hear in an athlete. I can't move. And so, of course, we try to reassure, and we had to remain as calm as possible. And so I said, come on, yeah, you can probably move. You can do it. Let's just try. I said, and I grabbed onto his hand, first of all, and I said, squeeze my hand. And he was attempting to do so in his mind, but nothing was happening. And so then I said, okay, move your right foot for me. And again, there was not a response. And so I went through the left foot and then the other hand, and then I kind of just doing some sensations, kind of started pinching around on different parts of his body. Can you feel this? Can you feel that? And most of the answers I was getting was no, or I am, and nothing was really happening. So at this point, and of course there was pain in the neck area too. I did have the pain there. So at this point, I made the decision to call an ambulance because this was going to be something that was a little bit beyond my capabilities and skills on the field. And so I made the call, and there was ambulance and fire truck that were close by. There was actually a fire station right at the other side of the complex that we were at. So they were there pretty quick. Once they got there on scene and assessed and got my history of everything that had happened, they made a decision to call the life helicopter, the care flight is what it was called. And so the care flight came, landed on the field, made their assessment, loaded him up, and they chose to take him by air ambulance because it was going to be the least traumatic for him. Because if they put him in a regular ambulance and then drove on the road to the hospitals, there's bumps, there's stops, there's traffic, there's all these kinds of things that you can't control. Whereas in an air ambulance, once you're up and you're down, it's smooth. For the most part, it's pretty smooth. There's not going to be any delay in receiving care. And so he spent several weeks in the hospital, probably more like months in the hospital. And he did return to school eventually in a wheelchair, and did regain some use of a little bit of upper body and arms, not completely 100%, but anyway, this young man is doing well today. So, but that was probably one of the most catastrophic injuries that I've had to deal with. Never fun to deal with that kind of an injury. So, what about in terms of the most gruesome injury? So, I've had several injuries that are gruesome, and I'm talking like just nasty looking, blood, bones, things like that, right? But there's one that always kind of sticks out in my mind. And we were playing football again, and this young man was a defensive player, and he was in the backfield of the defense and was attempting to make a tackle on a person and kind of got blindsided, and he got hit right on his hip area as he was making an attempt to cut back upfield. And as that happened, the way that the opposing player hit him, it just really it broke his femur. He broke his femur, and when it hurts. I mean, it was so bad. This young man was screaming really loud. We were at a small stadium in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't a big town at all. It was a small town, and everything went silent when he got hurt, and all you could hear was his just blood curdling screams, right? Because he was in so much pain. And luckily, it was on the sideline closest to me, so I got to him. And the first thing is, again, I'm running up and I see one thing that just did not look right. And he broke his femur. Pardon me, I'm going to stand up. Broke his femur right here, okay? And his foot was above his head up here. His whole leg had curled backwards where the break was, and his leg was up here. Now, luckily, at this particular school, our team physician was traveling with us that day. And it was kind of one of those moments where we both get there at the same time because we just hear him screaming, and we both get there, we look at him, and we're both like, ugh. And again, got to remain calm, can't show too much emotion, right? And my first words out of my mouth, I was like, we got to reduce that and put it back in place. And I looked at, or I'm sorry, I didn't say that. The doc said that. The doctor said, he goes, we got to reduce that and put it back in place. And I looked at him and I was like, well, you're the doc, bro. And so I was not about to put my hands on that. But anyway, so he did. He got down. He was an orthopedic surgeon, so he knew what he was doing. And he immediately grabbed the foot, put it in some traction. So whenever you have a fractured femur, an important part of it is putting them in traction, because a lot of times what happens is when you break the femur, the muscles in the thigh area are so big that and they have so much contraction in them that it pulls the bones this way. They separate and they kind of come, and hence you get a shortened leg a little bit. Not like huge, but there's a difference in the leg length with broken femurs, and usually there's some kind of swelling and deformity involved as well. So he was putting traction, he was holding traction on it, and then I made the call to the ambulance, and the ambulance came. We put a traction splint on him there on the field. It's called the HARE traction splint. That's HARE, and they put that traction splint on him and transported him. He wound up having some surgery, had a rod. Not only did he have an internal rod, but he also had an external fixation as well. And he recovered in about a year, came back, played basketball, had a great year playing basketball, did not play any more football. But that was pretty that was pretty nasty to see by far. That was probably one of the most gruesomes. I've had some other things. I've had somebody cut the tip of their finger, kind of just got really pulled off in their helmet, right? Football. Somehow finger got stuck in the crossbars of the helmet, and when he went to go pull it out, it just ripped off the end of that finger. That was kind of gnarly because you could see the bone, and actually that one was kind of, it was bad, yes, but it was kind of funny too because we couldn't find the finger. For the longest time, we didn't know where it was. We didn't realize it was stuck inside the helmet. But eventually, we found it, but it was too late because he had already gone on his way to the hospital. His parents came, picked him up, were taken to the hospital so they could fix it. And then we did find it, wrapped it in some gauze, wet gauze, and some ice, packed it in ice, and took it. But by then, it was already too late, and so he just was missing part of his fingertip. So lots of different types of gruesome injuries that I've seen, lots of blood, deal with blood sometimes on a daily basis. Just somebody's always cutting themselves or doing something crazy. But yeah, that's the most gruesome injury. That would also, the fingertip would probably be my most unusual, right? So I've had my most catastrophic neck. The most gruesome was that femur. And the most unusual was definitely got to be that fingertip. I never have had anything like that. That was the first time I could say that somebody's gotten their fingertip cut or caught in a helmet, yanked it off. Where does that, how? But it did. It happened. Had all kinds of other things. Now, I've always been in the big city until I came here to Bandera. And then here in Bandera, since we're a smaller school out here in the country, I did have some unusual things that people would report to me, such as, getting bucked off a bull, getting bucked off a horse, getting kicked by a horse, got hurt, baling hay, had a four-wheeler accident, right? ATV accidents, had all kinds of different things like that was new to me because, again, I was in the big city, used to just people getting hurt playing sports, not doing, work-type injuries on, bull riding, horse riding, but they got to ride horses, to do the things. Bull riding, there's just bull rodeos big out here, right? In Bandera, like every summer, for the entire summer, they have rodeos every Friday and Saturday, I believe. So unusual injuries for sure, but definitely the fingertip takes the cake on that one. So, as far as other types of injuries that we treat and that I treat, they're sprains. Sprains happen to ligaments, and usually that's around the joint area. Ankle sprains, knee sprains, finger sprains, elbow, shoulder. I've had all kinds of sprains. Strains. A strain happens to a tendon or a muscle, and get those all the time in the back. Hamstrings, hamstring muscle, we'll get a strain, sometimes occasionally a quad, bicep, right? So most of those are like weightlifting type stuff. The strains, the muscle strains and tendons. And then of course the ligament sprains are, just because it stepped wrong, twisted wrong, stepped in a hole, stepped on somebody's foot, something of that nature. So countless fractures, that I've had to deal with. Now, let me kind of clarify this, though, because this is another thing. It's not really a pet peeve, but it just makes me go. So, fractures and breaks, there's not a difference between a fracture and break. And sometimes you'll hear announcers on TV for sports events. They'll say, it's a big difference if it's fractured or if it's broke. It's the same, y'all. It's if it's fractured, it's broke, and if it's broke, it's fractured. There's no way around it. Now, there are different types of fractures. Yes, there's lots of different types of fractures. There's incomplete fractures. There's complete fractures. There's open fractures. There's closed. There's compound. There's transverse. There's oblique. There's spiral. There's all kinds of fractures. But basically, it's a break in the bone. And so, fractures and breaks, same thing, people. Okay, but I've treated countless numbers of those. Sometimes in fingers, I've had people fracture a finger and it looked or appeared to be a dislocation, but it was not. And it turned out I did not try to manipulate dislocations back. And I've dealt with lots of dislocated fingers, and I've reduced lots of fingers, and have reduced shoulder dislocations, right? So whenever you put a dislocation back in place, it's called to reduce. You're right. You reduce that injury. And I've done that. And sometimes I'll see something and I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not going to try and reduce that one because it looks broke. Sometimes you can just tell. Sometimes it's hard to tell. But whenever there's a dislocation, you should always get an x-ray because there's a good chance that there is some kind of a fracture. I've dealt with ACL injuries. I had an unusual year last year. I had too many ACL injuries. I had several. I even had already a couple this year. ACL injuries are no fun. Those are 9-month injuries to recover from, sometimes even a year. I've had a couple that have even come back a little bit sooner than 9 months, but those are special cases. ACL is pretty big. MCL injuries, that's a medial collateral ligament, right? The medial collateral ligament is one of the 4 stabilizing ligaments in the knee. It's on the inside portion of your knee, kind of like where your knees touch, where both knees come together. That's the medial side. That's a common injury, actually, in football. So I've had plenty of those that I've dealt with. Again, like I said, shoulder injuries. There's lots of things that can happen in the shoulder, right? You can have a separated shoulder. Now, a separated shoulder does not mean that it separates from the body, right? There's a ligament right up here. It's called the AC ligament, right? The acromioclavicular ligament. And that you can injure falling on the ground, and henceforth it becomes what they call a separated shoulder. It's basically a ligament sprain. There's a ligament there. So I've dealt with that. You can have your rotator cuff, right? That's C-U-F-F, not cup. Okay, it's not a rotator cup. It's a rotator cuff, C-U-F-F. It's 4 muscles, right? And they originate in the back and they wrap around the front of the shoulder. One comes underneath. And you can injure those, and those are strains. Okay, because those are occurring to muscles and tendons. So that's a strain. So lots of shoulder types. I told you I had shoulder dislocations. I used to have this one girl, right, at another school I worked at that had recurring shoulder dislocations. She played basketball. And every time she would go up for the ball, somebody would kind of hit her, swat her down. And when they did that, her shoulder would just pop out because it happened so many times that the surrounding structures couldn't support it. And so it was easy for it to come in and out. Once you dislocate a joint one time, it's so much easier for it to happen again unless it's truly healed or if it needs repairing, it gets repaired. So had one girl happen to her multiple times, right? Sometimes it happened multiple times a game. Right, but she got so used to it, her body just got used to it. But then after she finally got it fixed, now she's a physical therapist, right? So she is taking care of people that maybe that's happened to, and she knows how to deal with it because firsthand experience, right? I deal with lacerations, abrasions all the time. Those are usually kind of bloody. Matter of fact, today. If you go to TikTok and scroll to today's date, right, January 19th, 2024, you can see me take care of somebody's toenail ripped off, right, fell off. And usually that's because of a result of trauma. Somebody gets stepped on and the toe gets all black and blue underneath. Eventually the nail's going to come off, and it happened. Take care of that kind of stuff. Anyway, that's not really a laceration or abrasion, but just things that I deal with, right? So all kinds of different injuries that we deal with on a day-to-day basis in the athletic training room. Athletic trainers are schooled in emergency care and how to deal with those types of sports injuries, even things as simple as patellar tendonitis or jumper's knee, right? So lots of things that we can take care of. So I kind of hope that gives you a little bit of an insight as to the types of injuries that we do treat. I see everything. Now, some of the things that I can't do so well with, right, like are illnesses. Sometimes if it's something simple, especially with COVID came around, got a little bit more versed in having to deal with COVID type illnesses, right? Check my temperature, look for the signs and the symptoms, that kind of stuff nature. But if you're going to come and I can't diagnose strep throat. I can't diagnose if you got a flu. I can't diagnose, I can maybe say, oh, it sounds like you have this or it sounds like you got this, but I can't, not illnesses. Okay. Sports injuries, yeah, let's go. I'll take care of it. I can probably tell you what's wrong. Okay. Any kind of injury like that, some traumatic injury. So that's kind of what we do. Again, we can do some illnesses, right? Heat exhaustion is considered an illness. It's not an injury. Heat strokes are illnesses. It's not an injury. We can deal with that kind of stuff. Cold exposure, hypothermia, right? Frostbites, frost nip. Those are or illnesses, or that we can deal with. They can lead to injuries, but for the most part, they're illnesses. We can deal with that kind of stuff. Diabetics, we deal with diabetes, right? We have athletes that are diabetic and they have to take their medication or make sure they're eating properly before they work out. We can deal with that kind of stuff too. So there's some illnesses that we can, but not like things that you would just regularly go for. I woke up feeling sick today. Can you tell me what's wrong? No, sorry, I can't. Go see your doctor. I was playing sports, twisted my knee. Can you tell me what's wrong? Yes, I can do that. So thanks for joining me today on this little small talk about what kinds of injuries do we treat. If you have a question about an injury, shoot me a comment and I'll see about trying to get to it and answer your question, or maybe talk a little bit more about that injury in another episode. So again, hope you enjoyed this episode. Be safe out there, and when in doubt, always remember, put that in an ice bath, baby.